My journey through the KZN battlefields continued to the Talana Museum in Dundee. Talana might very well be the Zulu word for museum. Loosely translated, it means the shelf where precious items are stored, and that is exactly what you will find here.
Okay, BRONWELL, so we're at the Talana Museum. Tell us what it is actually about and what does it actually hold?
Okay, here in Talana Museum, we've got 23 buildings.
Okay.
This building, it's building number 1 on the map, which is called Henderson Hall. It's all inside. You're gonna find glass museum, mining section, pit gallery, hall of clothing. We've got even Colopolis, streets and area for our town, Dundee. And we've got Talana House, it's about history, all inside there. Inglo-Boer War, Anglo-Zulu War, cannibals, Bushman painting, all in there. Smith Cottage, original house of gentleman, call it Peter Smith. He was come from Scotland. Okay. He's one of our founders of our town, Dundee.
This museum is set on a 20-acre heritage park, paying homage to the history of the area as well as the town of Dundee.
We've got a village up there, which is called KWAKUNE, cultural village.
KWAKUNE obviously meaning it was like this.
It was like this, yes. Actually, in Zulu, we're trying to bring back those good memories.
Okay.
How it was like this.
Okay.
We're talking about Zulu culture in there.
Okay.
In different buildings, we even talking about the different types of buildings. As we are the Zulu people, as we're growing, we used to stay in different houses. Not nowadays, as other people now, they're using even the building their house with their tiles and all those stuffs.
KWAKUNE Cultural Village is located on the museum grounds.
This is a cultural village. We do tour guiding, and then we just telling about the people, where we're coming from, what's the roots of the village, and we just presenting our culture, how we used to demonstrate before, and then how the things they get it to change. It's a little bit modernized than other people's village, because other people's village you find that they are demonstrating. We don't demonstrate, but we got more information inside in the boards, and then they're telling about more what this is about and then where we're coming from.
KWAKUNE means it was like this. It is therefore a village preserved in time, celebrating Zulu heritage and culture.
Our village is here to teach people about the Zulu culture, their heritage, where they came from. We have our exhibition huts that have panels with everything that my tour guide would talk about is on the panels. We have brochures, etc. But it's basically to teach. We get a lot of school children coming through that don't know where they came from, their Zulu heritage, and it's actually sad because they come here and we teach them about it. We have a lot of tourists from overseas that come, and they also find our village really interesting because it's all about the Zulu culture. And you find nowadays, in the modern times, it's really lost, you know, but what I find is, being the Zulus, they still cling to their ancestors, which is great, and we just had to remind them of it.
My time in Dundee had come to an end. My next destination was Ladysmith, and my first stop was the aptly named Siege Museum, where I bumped into a guide and lecturer, Raymond HERON.
Raymond, thank you again for your time. Of course, we're at the Siege Museum. We had come from, looking at all the other battles, everything from Isandlwana to Rorke's Drift, and all of those really symbolizing different parts and different winners, if you want to call it that as well. But if we come up to this museum, what are people actually going to see and what are they going to feel?
Well, the first thing you need to know is that the town of Ladysmith was under siege during the South African War of 1899-1902.
Hence the name, of course, Siege Museum. Okay.
Hence the name of the Siege Museum, exactly. Okay. And in an attempt to relieve the town of Ladysmith, the British forces under the command of General Sir Edward Buller fought 4 battles. They fought the Battle of Colenso, they fought a battle at SPIOENKOP, they fought a battle on the Tugela Heights, and they had also fought a battle at Volkrans. Now, all those battles are depicted in this museum. So if you're a history enthusiast and you want to know more about the actual relief of the town of Ladysmith, there's no better place than in the Siege Museum.
Yeah, I mean 4 wars, if you want to call it that, or 4 battles essentially, all giving off different meanings as well.
Correct. So not only do you get an understanding as to the difficulties for the 2 forces, because the great divide between the British forces and the Boer forces was the Tugela River. That's how you come to find the Battle of Colenso being fought on the 15th of December 1899, because at Colenso there were 2 bridges that crossed the Tugela River, a wagon bridge and a rail bridge. And those were the only 2 bridges across the river 113 years ago. So that's how the first battle came to be fought at Colenso. Then it was a failed battle, and General Buller was instructed that he had to relieve Ladysmith. So he moved from Colenso upstream to an area which is known as Spearman's Farm, and that's how he came to fight the Battle of SPIOENKOP. And then from there he went and fought the Battle of Volkrans. Then he went all the way back to Colenso, and he spent 2 weeks fighting on the Tugela Heights. Sure. And that's what this museum depicts.
And how the time span then in terms of those wars as well? What's the time span?
Those battles, the first battle was fought on the 15th of December 1899, and Ladysmith was relieved on the 26th of February 1900. So it took just on 4 months to relieve the town. And in this museum you'll find a lot on how the people of the town managed to survive the period, how disease started to run rampant through the town, how they had to move people from the center of the town out to a place called Intombi Camp. All the diseased people were there. And by the time the siege was lifted, and they'd eaten all the horses, the rats had been eaten.
After taking in all the artifacts in the museum, Raymond invited me to find out more about the Battle of SPIOENKOP as we headed out into the field.
On the night of the 23rd of January 1900, 1,700 British soldiers start to climb SPIOENKOP. They're told that they must climb in single file and complete silence. Don't light cigarettes, don't do anything that might give the maneuver away.
A bit of a problem considering that they all smoked, I'm sure.
Quite a few of them did. So at 10 o'clock on the night of the 23rd, 1,700 men start to climb SPIOENKOP. Amongst them are the Royal Engineers. They're carrying picks and shovels and crowbars. But so difficult did this climb become. It had been raining for 3 days. It was slippery, wet underfoot. They were told they could discard the implements if they so wished. So once they got onto the top of the mountain, they didn't have the implements that they needed to get themselves dug in. There had been an issue of empty sandbags at the base of the mountain, but no one had given the soldiers the order to collect the sandbags. Had they brought sandbags with them, they could have stuffed them with whatever they could get in here and have built up a defensive position. They get left behind. Well, little did these British soldiers here realize, but they were actually digging their own graves. These white stones here mark the British trench that had been dug on the top of SPIOENKOP between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the morning. And after the battle, the men who lost their lives here were put back into these trenches. The sides were built up the way you see them now. They then gathered all the little stones from around the top of the mountain to place on top of the bodies so as to afford them a proper burial. The area is referred to in the history books as the Acre of Massacre. It remains the smallest piece of ground on which more men lost their lives in a single battle than any battle fought anywhere in the world up to current time.
Sure.
With the British having moved on to the summit in the mist, and Louis Botha, who was leading the Boers, having an intimate knowledge of the terrain, having been here for over a month waiting for the British to arrive, he says to his men, they are digging in on the summit. I want you to put sharpshooters on the northeastern crest line. There are massive boulders there. It's a perfect place to take up a position. And he then said that he wanted more sharpshooters on Aloe Knoll. He wanted a Maxim Northfield gun on the ridge that runs between Aloe Knoll and the Twin Peaks. And on the bigger of the Twin Peaks, he positioned a Krupp gun. And the whole scene was now set for the battle to begin. But it couldn't begin until such time as the mist that was hanging on the mountain had lifted.
Of course, because nobody could see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to the great detriment of the British soldiers, as the mist starts to lift permanently at around 8 o'clock in the morning, they find that they're looking straight out into the east. Rising morning sun, glare through the cloud blinding. The Boers open a deadly fire from their position onto this, and we know that over 70 of the British soldiers here were shot through the right temple. There's one final fact about SPIOENKOP that I think leaves most people wondering. On the top of this mountain, on the 24th of January 1900, there were 3 men. If a stray bullet had hit any one of the 3, you ask yourself what you think might have happened to the course of world history. And that's not to take anything away from the men who were killed in the battle. The men I'm referring to are firstly Louis Botha. He went on to become the first Prime Minister of the Union of South Africa in 1910.
Sure.
Winston Churchill.
Of course.
One wonders what would have happened to the Western world without him in the Second World War. Sure. And Gandhi. The Mahatma Gandhi was here as a stretcher bearer, and it's on this mountain on that day that he is reputed to have got his first feelings for passive resistance. He said that he could see what the human race was capable of doing to one another, but he needed to know in the name of what.
With that, my journey in the KZN battlefields was over, but the stories I heard from both Raymond and Thulani made me feel just that much richer, stories I can now share about my country and her colorful past.